2020 has been quite a year, and we are so excited to try and do our best to make this a win. We have been through a lot of ups and downs in every way this year. I think that we've blamed as many things on 2020 as have come our way. So I'm excited to be here with 3 other wonderful professional women to give a few tidbits on their angle for 2020 and how to make this last quarter a big success. So we are going to hear a few tidbits across the board, which we'll run through, along with a few points that we'll share on some slides. And at the end, we do have a survey, which we would love you to take 2 or 3 minutes to complete, to give us some feedback and let us know if there's any further information that you would like. So we are going to kick it off with Angela Von Detten.
Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you again for joining us for this webinar. My name is Angela Von Detten. I am a real estate agent with Compass. I service all the way from downtown to Santa Monica, South Bay to the hills. And I've been in the business for about 10 years. I wanted to share with everyone on this webinar some tidbits on whether now is a good time to buy or sell. But first, before I get into that, I just wanted to give a macro level understanding of what is the real estate market like right now, because I often get asked that question. So our business is actually surging. Once quarantine had hit in March, of course, all things came to a stop as the entire country was trying to figure out how to pivot and grow from this pandemic. Real estate, we were able to figure out how to safely conduct our business and make sure we were prepared for the coming months. So starting from June and onward this summer, we actually saw a delayed spring market, which snowballed into quite a busy summer market. And this summer has been one of the busiest summers in compared to year-to-date sales from last year. And we also believe that the strong growth is going to continue, because as we review all the statistics, we realize that the summer market wasn't just pent-up demand, or it wasn't completely wholeheartedly just the delayed spring market. It's actually a new normal for this new demand, because this pandemic, unlike other downturns, is actually inspiring people to move. You know, after being stuck inside for months, people are more intimately aware of the inadequacies of their home more than ever before. And across every consumer category, people want homes with more space, more backyard, more pool. They want that flex office workspace. And this new demand is leading us to see more transaction activity. And like I said, the single family home sales reached this summer the highest it's been in 13 years. So just to see on a macro level, that's where real estate is headed. So in an unusual year, there are still many buyers and sellers trying to figure out whether this is a good time to buy or sell. So I wanted to share some points for buyers who are on the sideline why it is not a good idea to wait. Number one, most likely prices will go up because of inflation. As we all know, the unprecedented government stimulus can expect to inflate sooner or rather than later. And real estate is a great hedge against that. While no one can really predict when to buy at the bottom of the market, if you do continue to wait, you may end up chasing the market and you may end up buying for more than you had anticipated. Number two, interest rates are at a historic low, but we don't want to take that for granted. You know, requirements and rates will worsen at some point. And so while they are at a historic low, and while the Feds have stated that they will wait until 2022 to raise the rates, we don't want that deadline to make you procrastinate until then. We want to take advantage and plan ahead, because that's the smart thing to do. Number three, there's also real value in comfort and security right now. So you have to ask yourself this question: what matters more to you, trying to time the bottom of the market or finding the right home that will make you and your family feel comfortable and safe during this time? You know, while we're still in a pandemic, there's a lot of uncertainties that will continue to arise and come our way. And knowing that you're in your dream home with your family, your loved ones should be more important than anything else, because nothing is truly guaranteed. And lastly, try to avoid the wait and see mentality. Like I mentioned before, nobody buys at the bottom of the market and actually knows it. Because if you do, I'd love to meet you personally. But we want to focus on the quality as your priority. You know, the quality of your property, the quality of the location, the quality of your lifestyle that it'll bring you. And that's truly the best deal as the best match for what will meet your needs for the years to come. So advice for buyers on the sideline is do not wait. And for sellers waiting to list, Saba, if you can help click the next one. Okay, so sellers who are waiting to list, let me tell you this, selling in a down market means you can actually buy in a down market. If you list now, you might sell a little bit lower than you had hoped for. However, you can buy so much more for that. So a little give, a little take. When you think of that home that you want to purchase with the extra balcony or the home office, just know that technically you're buying that as a discount as well. So that is an added benefit. Number two, one of the most important is that the active buyers who are out there looking are more serious than ever. As I mentioned before, people have spent the last 5 months stuck in their homes realizing what they're missing, what they want. And the buyers who are out there looking in the middle of COVID-19 are very motivated to get a transaction done. These aren't the looky-loos that we're used to in the past. These are serious, pre-approved buyers who are on the hunt day in and day out, especially also because in our market, the inventory is still low. So chances are, if you list now, you will more than likely find a right buyer for your home rather quickly, okay? And then number three, price so that the market chases you up, not down. One of the biggest mistakes sellers make when listing their home is listing the price too high. More than ever now, with the internet, buyers can just go online and look at the data themselves. They can see the sold homes within your area within seconds and compare those statistics to your home. So if you don't price correctly, chances are buyers won't give you an offer, or they might not even want to see your home. So you'll want to strategize with your agent and make sure you price it right at the buyer's perceived market value so that you can create the bid up to your ultimate price. And then lastly, we don't know what the future holds. We don't want to take this buyer demand for granted because this unprecedented year is far from over. The election is still coming on, and this ongoing pandemic could freeze real estate activity again, making it harder to sell afterwards. And so if your home may actually require some home improvement services to shine, it's time to take advantage of this moment right now when we know that contractors are still allowed to go inside your home and work on these things. So there may be a lot of uncertainty still, so if you wait, you could miss this great window of opportunity sell. So my tips for the sellers on the sideline, do not wait. And so my information is on the next slide. You can always feel free to call, text, email me, direct message me for more info, and I hope that was informative and helpful for everyone. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Angela. Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria McLaughlin. I'm a family law attorney here in LA, and I'm going to talk to you about some relationship best practices. So, of course, it goes without saying that it's been a tumultuous year for all of us, and we've all been affected in many ways. But one standout way is that, for the most part, anyone who had a big fat wedding planned for 2020 had to postpone it until 2021. So while that is not cool, I've actually received a number of inquiries from people who have 2021 weddings and are wondering about a prenup. So I'm going to spend some time today talking about premarital agreements, and I'll refer to them as prenups because I know that's what most people like to call them. It can actually be really helpful having some extra time and being able to take your time with a prenup, because less pressure is just good emotionally from an emotional perspective, That said, it's also good legally and practically because it allows all the parties to get their ducks in a row and ensure that the prenup is in a good place to hold up in the future if ever somebody wants to enforce it. So I'm going to give you some general prenup background info, but really quick, I will be talking about California law in all of my slides. So if you happen to be tuning in from out of state, this might not apply to you. But California generally supports prenups because of the view that they actually promote marriage by allowing people to create their own terms for this very personal contract and thus make them more comfortable taking the leap. And in that regard, I do agree because, for example, if you're in a solid, loving relationship and there's some reason other than the romantic aspect that's holding you back from getting married, you should know that you can alter your property rights or potential support obligations, perhaps to an extent that makes you comfortable saying I do. So I'm gonna go over some issues that a prenup can cover by starting with what they cannot. Parties cannot waive child support. In California, if you have a kid, you will have to support the child. Parties cannot waive the mutual duty of support that they owe to each other while they're living together and married. And a prenup cannot try to impose a penalty on one of the spouses for fault during a marriage. California is a no-fault divorce state, and a prenup cannot change that. Then now that that's out of the way, we could talk about things that the prenup can do. I'm going to mention some of the biggest things, some of the things that are most important to people. One of them are earnings. So in California, all of your earnings and accumulations during marriage are presumptively community property. That means if you have a job right now and you are earning a salary, if you are married, that salary is community property. If you don't like that, if you're thinking about getting married and you do not want that to be the case, you can change that with a prenup. Another big issue is potential spousal support liability. A lot of people hesitate going into marriages because they're afraid of what could happen at the end and how long or for how much they might be on the hook. That is another thing that a prenup can address. It is trickier, however, because when a court is looking at the validity of a prenup, they will look at the prenup itself and they will look at the circumstances at signing. With spousal support, it is different because the court will also look at the circumstances as they currently are. And if it decides that at present it would be unconscionable to enforce that spousal support provision, a court won't do it. So what that means is parties can never be 100% sure that it is going to be enforceable, but they can do things to tailor provision to make it safer. So for example, an all-out waiver probably going to be most vulnerable to attack later, but maybe setting a cap on the length of time, a cap on the amount, or the opposite, a minimum length of time or a minimum amount are things you could think about doing. So now requirements. What does the prenup require? Well, it needs to be a writing and it needs to be signed by both parties. Okay, so that's easy enough. It also needs to be entered into voluntarily by the parties. That also sounds easy, but there are some technical things. No one should be under duress. Ideally, both parties should have independent counsel. And if you want to address spousal support, you have to have independent counsel, meaning each party needs to find their own attorney. And that's just generally recommended. Even though you're looking to get married and you might consider yourself a team, you are not a team yet legally. And then the parties need time. The family code dictates that the time needed is at least 7 days for whoever receives a draft to review it before signing. Sometimes parties go back and forth with drafts, and that's perfectly fine, but if there are any significant additions in later drafts, then the 7-day timer starts running from that draft. And then just practical steps to execute. If you want a prenup, first just find attorneys that you and your partner like. having independent counsel is one of the best ways for you to ensure that your agreement will hold up later. And then just talk to your partner about the provisions that are important to you. You can do that over the dinner table if that's your speed. And if that's too awkward, you can communicate through your attorneys, and that's perfectly fine too. And then you will have to do disclosures. So if you want a prenup, just be prepared. You will have to disclose all of your assets, debts, income, expenses. I mean, ideally, if you're getting married, you would know these things, but you will have to do it in writing and show your documents. Then time frame and costs. So people always want to know about how much and how long. And the answer for both is it really depends. It depends as far as timing on how long it takes for you to put together your disclosures and then exchange drafts. The only hard and fast rule is it's at least going to be 7 days before you sign the final one. And costs, it does depend on the timing. You probably want to budget at least a few $1,000s each to retain counsel, which can be hard to swallow, but I will just say, when you consider the cost of a contentious divorce, it's a bargain. So if these issues are important to you, I would consider the prenup an investment. And there are also marital agreements and cohabitation agreements. I don't have time to go into that today. If you have questions about those, email me. I just wanted to note that they exist. You are able to alter rights if you're already married. And if you aren't married but want some of the rights that come with marriage, you should know California doesn't recognize common law marriage, but you can contract with your partner to get some of those rights. So with that, I'm going to move on to divorces. And there's no way to sugarcoat the fact that most breakups are really hard and not what people would call a winning time in their lives. But that said, there are also opportunities for new beginnings. And I've seen people come out the other side even stronger than they were before, pursuing new professional goals or just achieving more generally for themselves than they had previously. And I'm going to tell you why I think it can still be a win. But first, just some basics for filing for divorce. In California, you have to be a resident. If you want to file, either you or your spouse has to have lived in the state for 6 months, and then the county where you plan to file for the last 3 months. If you don't meet these requirements, it's totally fine. You could file for legal separation now and amend your petition later to get a divorce. Just know that you'd have to take that extra step. So the basics. Somebody files, that is the petitioner, and then they have to serve their spouse. And that spouse has the opportunity to respond. They'd be called the respondent. And in a divorce case, it doesn't matter who is who. The only reason it might is if the respondent doesn't reply, and then the petitioner could get a default, essentially asking the court to grant a divorce judgment on their terms. Then the parties exchange financial disclosures, and then they could negotiate a judgment. Okay, what I said was all very quick and simple and sounds so easy, but so much can happen in between filing a petition and then getting the judgment. And that's where divorces get time-consuming, expensive, and can be hostile. So examples would be if you have to engage in discovery, issue subpoenas, or take depositions, lots of things can happen. But I'm positing to you that a 2020 divorce can be a win if you take a certain route. It takes two, but if you and your partner can agree on just one thing, hiring a mediator instead of 2 litigators to duke it out, you could save a lot of money, stay out of court, and come out on the other side feeling a little bit more like a winner. So keep in mind, you don't have to see eye to eye on everything to choose this route. All you need to agree on is the process. So this is the process that you would rather have. If you guys are both there, then a mediator can help you resolve the rest of the legal issues. You can find out what your rights are, what a judge might do, what your partner's entitled to. You can be informed of all of these things and have someone do all of your paperwork for much less. The reason is, assuming you and your partner agree to hire a mediator, you're hiring just one neutral instead of 2 attorneys. So you're paying at least half, but honestly, probably less, because generally people litigating their divorces with two attorneys end up getting into a lot more battles. It's just the approach. It's naturally adversarial because you're automatically on two different sides. When you hire a mediator, you can sit on the same side facing the mediator and try to work it out together. Again, breakups are hard and sad, and they often don't feel like a win, but I do think that if you and your partner decide on one last thing to just choose a certain process, you can make it a win. And this pandemic has been very difficult. The quarantine put a lot of pressure on people, and a lot of breakups have happened, but they don't have to be all bad. And it's actually an opportunity to start this new, hopefully post-COVID life fresh. And with that, I'm handing you over to Chantel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Victoria. And I am excited to share with you guys how to make 2020 a win financially. This has been a challenging year for a lot of people in regard to their finances. Many people have been laid off or furloughed, not getting bonuses that they were expecting. Lots of things have been challenging. There have also been financial winners. Many people in the tech sector have really thrived through their equity pricing going up. So my goal today is to talk to you about what are some of the things, regardless if you have made more money this year than ever because you accidentally had the foresight to start a hand sanitizer company a year ago, or if you have had a really troubling time financially this year. I want to go through some of the components that can help you become financially bulletproof in this last quarter. So if we go to the next slide, here is my quick to-do list for you. And these are things, like I said, that are relevant for everyone at every stage. So first of all, know your cash flow. What does it cost to live your life, pay your bills, do all the things you need to do? I get people that call me all the time and ask questions like, how much of a house can I afford? Should I go on this vacation? Could we have a second home? Can I afford to leave my industry and start a company? All of those are really great questions, but it's really hard to answer any of that if we don't know what comes in and what goes out. So I always want to remind people to start there. And I know budget sometimes is a four-letter word to some people. I don't believe that everyone needs to have a crazy budget where they track every penny that they spend. There are some people that enjoy actually that process. If you are not one of them, it's okay. It's important though to have that rough idea of what it costs to live your life. And that pulse alone will help you be proactive in every other aspect of your life financially. Secondly, this is a great opportunity to do a risk tolerance checkup. So what I mean by that is many people have a 401k or several 401ks from different companies or other investment accounts, and they honestly have no idea what it's invested in. Many times people will tell me that they are invested in something that's really diversified. That's not an answer. That's not a risk tolerance measure. And it's not necessarily your fault. You have to log in and check these things. But my call to action for you is just to make sure that your accounts are invested the way you want them to. It's really easy to be disappointed when your account was conservative and the whole market went up. And also when the market crashes, you're so upset that your account balance went down. The key is to invest not based on what you feel you should, but based on what your real belief set is around risk and what kind of volatility you can handle. The next component is to make sure that you understand your benefits from work if you have employer benefits, but not to assume that they solve everything. So many times people will tell me, oh yeah, I'm set for retirement. I have a 401k, or I have life insurance through my company, or yeah, I have a really great legal plan I pay for through my company. Those things don't replace the actual action of making sure that they're adequate and you're getting your needs met from them. If you have a great legal plan that you pay for, but you've never called anyone to actually put a will and trust in place, nothing happened. No one did that on your behalf. Or if you have two little kids at home, the amount of life insurance provided through your employer is probably not enough. It depends on your situation. but make sure you look at your employer benefits, you sign up correctly. Open enrollment is usually coming up for most people in October. And then you supplement on top of that what you need in addition to what your employer provides. And remember, you could change jobs, so don't solely rely on your employer being the only avenue to get those benefits. The next component is so important. Make any of your financial decisions based on your goals, which you are trying to accomplish, not the media frenzy. I have to remind people all of the time that, that CNBC or Fox Business are not actually in the financial advice business. They're in the entertainment business. So they make money based off of providing really dramatic advice to you. Therefore, you keep watching and they can sell ad space. And while there can be very interesting and relevant components to those shows, it's important that any financial decisions you make start with what you are trying to accomplish. Should you be invested in a certain company? Well, it depends. What is the point of that money that you are going to invest? If it was for a home that you were about to buy because you just met with Angela, you probably shouldn't, right? You should make sure you have that cash accessible. So it really starts with what you are trying to accomplish, and don't look at products, investments, financial services as good or bad. They're only good or bad if they help you accomplish what you want. And lastly, do not fall into the trap of buying high and selling low. It's so easy to understand, just like Angela was talking about real estate, and Victoria talked about marriage. It's so easy to see something from an unbiased approach when you're not involved in it, right? Why would I need a prenup? My marriage is going to be perfect and flawless. I want to buy a house when the market's down, but somehow sell mine when the market's high. People feel the same way with investments. And the reality is that people really struggle to invest when the market is falling because they're scared. And when the market is high, they actually want to put money in. The best advice I can give you, again, is to always start with your goals in mind. That's going to help you dictate the level of risk and the timing when it comes to anything on the investment side. And the second component is dollar cost averaging, or consistently investing, is usually a very good approach for most people so that they don't let the emotion overtake all of their financial decisions. So my parting wisdom for you is, even if you don't feel like you have a lot of clarity on the year, if you don't feel like you have a lot of money to invest, maybe you, like I said, have lost a bonus opportunity that you were expecting for this year, at a minimum, what you can do is make sure that you are organized and have a good pulse on the resources that you have, the cash flow that you have, and make sure that you are an active participant in your financial life. Attached here is my information. If you have any questions, like I said, I'm Chantel Bonneau, a certified financial planner with Northwestern Mutual. And if myself or my team can answer any other questions, we are always happy to do so. And I hope that everyone makes 2020 a big win financially, and they feel really great going into 2021 with some important goals. And now I'm going to pass it off from here.
Hi, everyone. And first of all, thank you so much for joining us. I know we kind of did this in the middle of the day, so we all really appreciate that you're here. Victoria, Angela, and Chantel, thank you so much for what you have presented so far. And Chantel, I think you and I specifically have to talk later, because I'm guilty of being one of those people whose portfolio is diversified. I don't know where anything is though. So thank you very much for all those tips. I am going to talk about a little bit about employment law. And I think no one expected 2020 to start the way that it did. I don't think anyone expected that so many businesses would shut down, so many businesses would furlough a large amount of people, and so many people were going to lose their livelihood. And it's been a very difficult year for businesses and for employees. The good news is, I think what we've seen is a lot of employers have learned how to adapt to the pandemic that we are experiencing. And in doing so, they have managed to bring their employees back. They've managed to even grow. I know we have clients who have pivoted their business models. so that they can continue to employ their workforce, which is great. So I can talk hours and hours about employment law, but I'm going to concentrate on a few key points that I think are important to pay attention to really win 2020 from an employment standpoint, whether you're an employer or an employee. One of the things we're seeing employers do is they're bringing people back from working remotely. Even though it seems forever ago that the stay-at-home orders were in place, the fact is that if an employer is bringing employees back, they actually still need to comply. If you're in Los Angeles County, there's actually orders that you need to comply with, and there are steps that you need to take to ensure that you are ready for reopening, that you have, for example, a good procedure of what you're going to do if someone tests positive for COVID. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that based on the jurisdiction that you're in, you want to look at your city, you want to look at your county, that you know which orders apply and what steps you need to take to reopen your office. The second thing you want to do is make sure your employees know what those steps are. Employees need to know that they are protected and that when they come to the return to the workplace, that the employer will protect them. That makes employees feel better about coming back to work, and it allows employers to not hire new employees, but rather retain their old their old workforce. The last thing you want to do is you need to have a plan of action for what happens if an employee comes to work and says, I tested positive for COVID-19. What do you do then? There needs to be a guideline that you need to follow to, one, inform all employees who've come into contact with the employee who tested positive for COVID-19 and letting them know without disclosing the information of the person that someone tested positive for COVID-19. You need to shut down your office and follow all the right protocols to clean everything. Now, I know Victoria, Angela, and Chantal definitely spoke about things that were less directly related to COVID-19, but leave it to an attorney to really put a damper on things. But these are things that we need to talk about to make sure that we are taking the right steps to move forward and that we do end 2020 on a positive note. The other thing that I think it's like far back in our mind is the FFCRA is still in place. For those of you who don't know, the FFCRA is the Family First Coronavirus Relief Act. And what that does is two big things in the employment context. Number one, it allows for a 2-week paid vacation for coronavirus related circumstances, including if someone doesn't have childcare. And number two, it actually extends the FMLA. Right? And it makes FMLA a paid leave in COVID-related circumstances. So for those of us who are bringing employees back, you have to make sure that you do actually provide that notice to your employees and that your employees are very well aware of their rights. And then having a good understanding of how you're going to handle a situation where an employee comes to you and says, I don't have childcare for the next 2 weeks, I am asserting my rights. And there are proper procedures that you need to take. And I think with these things in mind, you can really bring all your workforce back in a positive way and ensure that you continue to be successful in 2020. For employees, we have something similar. So for employees, I think it's really important to understand your rights under the FFCRA. So for example, a lot of employees might have children and a lot of children, from what I hear, are in Zoom school these days, and most people right now do have a pretty good idea of their childcare, but because of COVID-19, that can change. For example, someone can currently have a nanny, and the nanny is a full-time nanny, is there 8 to 5 while you're at work, but your nanny could unfortunately get COVID-19 and be out for 2 to 3 weeks. At this point, you have a right to exercise your rights under the FFCRA and obtain paid leave from your employer. And it's really important to know that. For those of us who live in Los Angeles, the FFCRA actually, unfortunately, only applies to employers who have 500 or fewer employees. Los Angeles County, though, said, you know what, the Walmarts and the Targets, they need to comply with this too. And so Los Angeles actually passed a supplemental leave where employers who have more than 500 employees also need to comply with the FFCRA. So it is really important, I think, at this time to know your rights and know how to exercise them. A lot of employees are finding themselves in new employments. And when you are entering a new employment, I think, one, it is still really important to know your rights under the FFCRA. And it is also really important to know what the terms of your agreement are. Most employments do not have an employment agreement, but they will have at least an offer letter. And in your offer letter, you're going to see your terms of employment, including whether your employment is at will versus a term employment. All employment in California, by the way, is an at will employment until and unless you have an agreement with your employer stating otherwise. So when you're entering into this new employment, of course, you want to enter the employment with the best of intentions, but similar to entering a marriage, like Victoria was talking about, it's not a bad idea to have some things in writing. And so some of the things you want to have in writing are whether your employment is at will or whether it's a term employment, what you're getting paid, when you're getting paid, if you have a bonus structure, what does that bonus structure look like, and what are the benefits that you're entitled to, whether it's under the law or something you've negotiated. So it's really important to really look at that as employees. And by the way, for anyone who ever signs a term agreement, because there's a guarantee of how long you're going to be at that employer, it's a good idea to ask for some amount of severance in the event that you are terminated. The reason that's important is because when you're in a term agreement, you're thinking, hey, I'm going to work for this employer for 3 years. More often than not, a term agreement also has reasons for why an employer can terminate you. So while you're sitting there thinking, hey, I'm here for 3 years, you can be terminated before that time. So it is good to cover yourself and provide some sort of a safety net. Of course, I mean, we're seeing less and less of this, thankfully. But one thing we saw a lot of in the beginning of COVID-19, the pandemic, was separation from employment. And when you are separating from employment, I think there are a few things you want to negotiate then as well. First of all, if you have a severance, you have to think about what are some ways you can negotiate a higher severance. One thing I always tell people is you don't always have to be aggressive about this. You can always talk about the human aspect of what's happening, right? And I think that's something that I've learned from our managing partner, Amanda, which is that you have to be able to negotiate not just based on what's legally happening or not, but what the practical circumstances are. And I think that actually goes a really long way. The other thing you always want to look at separation agreements, if you're being offered a separation agreement, or what are the terms of this agreement? So for example, employers will often try to sneak in a non-compete into these agreements that even though in California, non-competes are not valid, I think maybe there might be 1 in a million that might be valid. You don't want a term like that in the agreement because you don't want to find yourself in some sort of a litigation later. So understanding your rights, understanding what should be in a separation agreement and what shouldn't be in a separation agreement is important. So one, I don't think you should agree to non-competes, even though they are invalid anyways. Number two, trying to negotiate for a higher severance. And number three, you want to see if you can get away with not having the separation agreement confidential, because you also want to be able to discuss with your future employer why you were let go from your previous job. Employers are not supposed to ask you that, but they always ask you that. With that, I am going to end my part of the presentation. And if anyone has any questions, My contact information is displayed here. And I'll be happy to answer any questions for any employers or employees about how to continue to win 2020. I think one thing we can all do is continue to work together rather than against each other, and really try to figure out how we can get through these last few months, and even if it's a small win.
Awesome, thank you. And next you can see on this slide a little QR code, if you can take a picture of it. And it is a very quick survey that would give us a little bit of feedback. And of course, if you want more information on anything, there is a spot in that, in addition to just reaching out to us individually, where we can follow up with you if there was something else you wanted, any guidance in any of these areas of expertise. And this is a great opportunity for us to reset and go into Q4, thinking about what we can do to build a great end of the year and make sure that you make some progress, whether it's as an employer, employee, home buyer, seller, in your relationship, in your financial life. And I hope that we can help get this dialogue moving in the right direction. So thank you so much. And we really appreciate everyone's participation today.
And I think we have a few more minutes if anyone has any questions that they would either like to ask us verbally or enter into our chat box here. We're happy to spend a few minutes doing that. Victoria, I think we have a question for you. Also, Victoria, you're on mute right now.
Thank you for that. All right, I see the question. It is, what factors generally affect spousal support? So a number of them, but I'll just really quickly give you the main ones. The court will be looking at the marital standard of living, and it'll be considering mainly the supported party's needs and the supporting party's ability to pay support. And along with these main factors, it'll look at the duration of the marriage, the health of the parties, the age of the parties. It's a whole holistic approach to see what is appropriate, what the paying party can afford, and what the supported party really needs. Well, thank you for that question.
Well, if it looks like we don't have any other questions, everyone on this webinar knows how to reach us. We'll be happy to answer any other questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.